everybody. Good morning to another episode of Awaken Your Relationships. I am Julie Murphy, and I am the money chick. And people will say, Julie, why are you doing things on relationships? Well, because we either work things out or we act it out, and we do it through our money, through our health, or through our relationships. So I have found through the years of doing this that it is super important to pull in experts like Rita on the relationship side to give some tips and tools. Because if your money stuff is good, then your relationship stuff might act out. And if your relationship stuff is good, your money stuff's going to act out. And so it's all about finding that inner emotional balance so that you can feel complete and whole, which is what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, the last, I love to study theories about how we work, and they've come up with some great systems theories over the last, 20, 30 years. And one of them is where they believe you've got these areas, and it makes perfect sense, that are already strong, and then areas that are weak. Mm-hmm. And so we're constantly seeking out, especially in our romantic relationships, we're attracted to people who have something that we want, that we aren't strong in.
That's so true.
And we look out in the world and we think we're all the same, but in reality, we're not. And we're usually attracted to the people who have something that we want. So people who aren't good at setting boundaries for themselves or respecting themselves tend to be attracted to narcissistic people.
That statement couldn't be more true.
Yes, narcissistic people are fantastic at enforcing and deciding their boundaries and getting exactly what they want no matter what. They're very good at putting self first, and people who don't put self first are attracted to that because on some level they know they're weak in it and they need to learn it. So if you stick with some relationships long enough, and I don't think relationships ever end because they're always in your system, right. They're always somewhere, you're always energetically attached to them. You develop that muscle, but it's why narcissistic people are also attracted to people who have lots of self-control, because narcissistic people don't have as much self-control. And let's say empaths who were traumatized as children and who are constantly overwhelmed by society have to exercise constant control because they're always being triggered by the outside. Because of their
they're trying to find that inner balance through things on the outside of them. And they actually, what's fascinating to me about it is that they don't actually ever really find it. Like they try to control everything to find it, but unless you find it inside, there's too many things outside of yourself to control. So you can't really actually ever get control of everything. But boy, you try like hell. Like,
well, I think about it. I've been thinking about this lately, that we are pre-programmed with our DNA, and we're pre-programmed astrologically, and we end up conditioned by our culture and our family. So for us to even get out of childhood without having all sorts of things that we trigger around or have to be worked out, I mean, that's delusional. Right. We have to assume that we came pre-programmed with triggers and conditioned with more. And our job is to understand what's going on. And so unconsciously, we keep being attracted to the same things, the same patterns, not because we're a bad person and we're broken, but because we're trying to learn something from them.
Right.
And empaths and narcissists almost always get together because empaths are great at empathy and narcissists are not.
Right.
So they want to learn empathy on some level, empathy for themselves, empathy for the world. And empaths want to learn boundaries. They want to learn how to stand up for themselves. And they're so strong and so controlled that it takes, a hurricane class, whatever, to devastate them for them to say, oh, you know what, I might need help now. So their strength is actually their weakness many times in romantic relationships, because it gets in the way of building the muscle of standing up for yourself in a way that other people respect.
Right. Wow. That's a mouthful of what you just said, because I was sitting there going, gosh, I can think of 10 clients that are like that. And I can think of another 20 over here that are like that. And it's fascinating to me because many people will come to me and they'll say, Julie, I feel like you're a money therapist. I'm like, I kind of am because I understand dynamics. So I can see the one who's not holding the boundaries. I can see the one that's holding the boundaries. And then I can see where it acts out in their money. Like one person will try to control the other person and how much, they're spending and what they're spending it on because they don't value it. And the other person's like, stop trying to control me. And like this, and this you could have no money in the bank and all debt. You could have $1 million plus in the bank. These dynamics happen no matter how much money you have.
Well, it's crazy because we come pre-programmed with this stuff. And if there was no one else on earth, we would have a relationship with a rock that was dysfunctional.
Well, is it because they mirror like what our holes are in essence in what we're here to learn?
When we look out there, we see what we expect to see. And you have to change what you expect to see if you want what's outside of yourself to change.
Oh, that's fascinating.
And even if nothing changes outside of you, when you change your expectations about what you're seeing, when you decide there is a good reason for this, even if I don't understand it, I am learning something, even if I don't know what I'm learning. If you anchor in those, then when you look outside, you're able to stay more peaceful and able to stay balanced as you walk through this journey. But if you're looking outside of yourself and you see threats and violators and victimizers, you will be projecting that onto everything. And if you're not projecting it onto something outside of you, you'll be projecting it onto yourself.
Right.
You'll be calling yourself names. Your body will fail you. You'll push it to the limits.
Well, and that's where I always say that we either we have all this shame, blame, guilt, and judgment because when we do push it back on ourselves, we then do take it on. This whole psychological way of us doing these things is fascinating to me because this is where that inner harmony, that inner wholeness, that inner completeness, that has to be had. So you're not only acting it out with other people or blaming it on yourself and you creating that. Like this is where, like, you hear a lot of people in the holistic community and spiritual community talk about, well, you need to love yourself and you need to like.
Right, but what does that look like?
And you sit there and go, great. Like, how do I do that? How do I like?
Well, and this is what annoyed me for the longest time with men in spirituality, and not to pick on men, let's just say the masculine, but there was this idea, that was pushed onto women that you just need to be more compassionate women. You just need to be more understanding women. And when we love ourselves, we think, oh, well, if I'm going to be loving, I have to be more compassionate to them. I have to be more understanding of them. You know what? No, sometimes you need to say, this is unacceptable. Here's the line. I'm going to defend it because it's not in our best interest for you to continue being a jerk.
Right. Right.
And men, because they struggle more with being a jerk and lacking empathy, then their advice to many women is, well, you just need to have more empathy and more compassion. But what women need typically, or the feminine energy needs, is not to be more of a doormat, to lie or cheat or steal in order to protect yourself. Right. It's to pick up a baseball bat and say, don't come any closer. But that's not the advice that many women are given. They're told, well, you're too, but they became that way because they didn't protect themselves, because they didn't know how to protect themselves. So then the side effect was they started to beat everybody up, and you look out into the world and everything a threat. Whether you think it's a threat or not, your body keeps reacting like it's a threat.
That is so true. Like I always love bringing my own examples into it. So like one of the things that I just learned, I had spent the last 12 days kind of on a mini little spiritual quest, trying to my kids were with their dad on vacation. And so I decided to go spend some time myself up in the mountains in Sedona. And one of the things that really became clear to me is that, I had a friend of mine, I say that it works out between your relationships, your health, or your money. And obviously I'm the money chick, so mine tends to be in my health and in my relationships. And so I had a friend of mine who's an expert at the health stuff, and he analyzed my blood to see like what's physiologically going on. And it is fascinating to me how he pricked my finger and took these blood samples on a slide, like under a microscope, and could see exactly. He was telling me things that he saw from my blood that he doesn't know any of this stuff about me, but he's sitting here going, you've got something on your right ovary, your right breast. It's here on your neck, on your right hand side. And he's like looking at a dry blood spot under a microscope. Right. And he literally was looking at the blood. And then he'd like go, what is going on here? I'm like, how did you know to go right there? So what's fascinating to me is that everything physiologically was on the right side of my body. And so when you talk about the Eastern philosophy says that the right side of your body is the masculine side of your body, and the left side of your body is the feminine side. So all of my physiological stuff is here on my right side. And then I was working with a spiritual coach later that day, and he says to me, you are the only one that can solve this. It's a balance between your what you are here to do is to find that balance. You have a ancestral karmic tear in your energy field of that men, you have a subconscious belief system that men are more powerful than women. And obviously, that is not reality, but somehow in my wiring, when my dad said to me when I was a kid, you should have been born a boy because you're good at things, it hardwired into me that men were more powerful on some level. And so my physical body is literally showing the signs of that. And then if you look at the relationships and things from my past, this is what is being worked out. And it is fascinating to me that unless you change it on the inside of you, there is zero that the outside world can even reflect back to you, because you don't have that wholeness inside.
And people don't even know how to find it. That's the problem.
Right.
Is spiritually, the spiritual truths all say you have to be whole, you have to find balance. And we all say, great, how are we supposed to do that? Right? But there's actually an answer to that. There's a lot of science now that shows how to find that wholeness and that balance. And it's by working with your spiritual nourishment, your emotional nourishment, your physical nourishment. It's respecting every single part of you and loving it and nourishing it.
It's almost like that's where, like, on the Western side of the medical world, that's where functional medicine doctors are coming into play now.
Yeah.
Right? That's the new growing field, if you will, in Western medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Things that have been around forever on the Eastern philosophy.
Right.
Right. And it's just fascinating to me that, we can talk about that we are the creators of our lives, but we don't realize, because we have that separation inside of ourselves, that's why the separation shows up in other areas of our lives.
Right.
And until we realize that we are the creators of that we create all this external stuff that's happening on the outside of us. Like we're like, what? I used to have a mentor that said, when you point the finger at somebody else, there's 3 other fingers pointing right back at you. And it's so true. But sometimes it's really hard to swallow that, like, and say, well, how am I participating in that? And I know, like, as I went through that journey and that healing process, you do go through a grieving process to find that wholeness, because once you finally can see and can finally understand how you are participating in the creation of that, it's very sobering.
Right. And we tend to have a lot of judgment for ourselves, and that gets in the way.
Right.
We say, well, if I were just less of this or more of that, and the thing is the idea in evolution, spiritual evolution, is to unplug from the story.
Right.
Is to get rid of a judgment either way, but owning it.
Right.
So like if you're being victimized, it's not about denying that you're being victimized.
Right.
It's owning that you're being victimized and you need to do something about it because nobody else is going to fix it because they're living their own life and, in their own head.
It just is what it is. Right.
Yeah, it just is what it is. And it's so hard because our body calls to us and says, no, this is their fault. The thing I discovered was the best cure for my irritations or frustrations?
What's that?
To drink 2 glasses of water.
Hmm.
Because if we let go of what stress is or isn't or what's causing us stress, if we just acknowledge that we're stressed and we ask ourselves, what can I do right now to feel less stressed? Well, I'm probably dehydrated because almost everybody is. And if I drink some water, like 2 glasses, so I can get my hydration back up,
right?
Give it 20 minutes and I won't be as irritated.
That is so true.
Blood sugar, same thing. It's just it all, but we have to stop saying this is your fault or this is my fault.
Right.
To get out of the Viking victim mindset,
So true.
And we have to say, oh, this just is. I am being victimized. And yeah, they are a jerk. Okay, what do I want to do about it?
Right. Right.
Because no matter what you say, blah, 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 the other person can't hear you.
No, they can't. And that's why it's got to change within you.
Yes. Yeah, they can't hear you. They're
and
blocked.
that's okay. You know what? Here's the thing. It's okay that the other person can't hear you.
Yes.
Like, we then make stories about why they can't hear you, and then we say hooked on that, and it's like blah 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 blah. No, let it go.
Let it go. The story. And this is how I do it, actually. So first of all, I'll drink a couple glasses of water. Then I make sure that to be proactive, I do things to keep my blood sugar level so it doesn't jump all over the place. I make sure I stay hydrated. And I say the Lord's Prayer in my head over and over and over and over and over, because what we say to ourselves wires and gets deeper and influences how we feel. And so if you choose something where when you're irritated, you're just going to focus on something positive. And I like the Lord's Prayer because I learned it when I was, baptized, and I can't get into trouble with it.
Right.
It's positive. It's life affirming. So if I just keep repeating that, even if I'm all pissed off at something, if I keep repeating
the energy, right?
Yes, it shifts.
Because it's no different than meditation music, right? It's a vibration. And so it's about you're tapping into an energetic vibration that shifts you out of wherever you're at to where you want to be.
And you have to make the conscious choice to do that. And the habit gravity of going the way you've always done it, of blaming and shaming and guilt and triggering. You have to consciously say, I no longer want to be like that because that's not serving me. And you have to trust and take that step towards loving yourself and repeating the things that are life affirming and doing the things that are life affirming and letting go of the things that drag you down.
Exactly. And you know what? It's okay to choose that. Like, on some level, we have to understand that we're like addicted to the suffering patterns.
Physically, we're chemically addicted to suffering, and it will pull us back and back because our nervous system is amped up and expecting to be triggered every 5 minutes. And so we're going to be triggered every 5 minutes. And you have to say to your body, I hear that you're stressed, but we are safe. So we're going to do this, and I'm going to prove to you that we're safe.
Right.
So that you don't have to hold on to that stress anymore, thinking that you'll need it because you're going to have to run any second.
Right.
That's why women keep weight on when they're older. One of the reasons is because if they're in consistent places of fight or flight, their body thinks they're going to need the resources.
I literally just said that to somebody last week. I said, I just have to figure out how to get my cortisol levels down because I'm constantly in fight or flight because of all the stuff that comes at me.
Yes.
And I'm like, and unless I figure that piece out,
Mhm.
no matter what I do, it doesn't matter. I've been eating healthy, I've been exercising, doing all that stuff, but until I can stop triggering when somebody else's crap comes at me, because pick 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 whatever. It could be anything or anyone. It could be work, it could be, kids, it could be family, it could be whatever. And if you don't know how to regulate your own nervous system to be like, and I will still say this, years ago, Deepak Chopra taught me that, oh, just observe it. And I'm like going, how do you observe it? Like, I just would be like, what? Like, how do you get in a place of just observing that? Okay, I get it on some level, but on another level, I'm like going, yeah. But until you have enough emotional space inside your own nervous system, you can't observe it.
Correct.
And now I sit there and I go, well, that's interesting. I have 2 new words. It's like, wow, that's really interesting. And I'm curious about that. I'm going to stay curious.
Perfect words. Those are great words
But
because
those
they
keep
bring
you
up
in a
your
place
brain.
of neutrality, right? And you can observe that.
Yes, and the words you say to yourself are how your body responds. So if your head's saying, "Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, the world's coming to an end," your body's like, "Oh my god, the world's coming to an end." But if you say, "Look, I know you feel stressed right now. Let's go for a walk." Then
Yeah.
your body says, "Oh, we're okay. It's okay. I'm just overreacting. Okay, cool, cool. Then we can calm down."
Mm,
But you have
yeah.
to recognize, people have to recognize what they're doing. I've got a great trick for that too. I tell people for like 2 or 3 days between, I don't know, 9 to 5 or 9 to 8, or
Yep.
pick a time, that once or twice an hour, whether it's 10 minutes after the hour or whatever, once or twice an hour, no matter what you're doing, I want you to pause and regulate. However you want to regulate, however you want to become present. Haven, heart math, TAT points, it doesn't matter. But like clockwork, for an alarm going off, okay, I need to regulate no matter what's going on. It only takes 30 seconds.
Right.
And if you do that, you're starting to train your nervous system that you're safe. And you're starting to learn how to build that observer, because
Right.
you're actually observing. You learn how to observe by stopping and observing.
Right.
And,
Exactly.
and so you have to say, I'm going to stop and observe. And
Mhm.
when you make that choice, that's how the observer develops. And then that's how you're able to make better choices, because now you've got, the good angel and the dark angel, telling you different things. But now you have choice instead
Right.
of just being controlled by how you feel.
Right. Yeah. And we don't realize, I want people to hear that. You are being controlled in how you feel. Like, we have to recognize, this is where, again, it goes inside. It goes to, we are the creators. We are the ones creating this environment. And I've been reading a lot lately about how the fact that our emotions have pretty much hijacked our lives. And we have to realize that and make a conscious choice that if you want that inner peace and that inner wholeness and that inner completeness, you're not going to get it if you keep letting your emotions hijack you. And trust me, there's a reason I wrote a book called The Emotion Behind Money, because I let my emotions hijack my life for many portions of my life. And then when I started to recognize, going, oh, no, we don't need to do this, and when I wrote this book in 08 and 09, it was like, okay, we can shift this. We can do this. Like, we can observe our emotions and go, okay, because really the only way out of it is to feel your feelings and then move on.
Yeah, and you don't even have to feel it the whole time. You only need to feel it for like 5 seconds.
But and often what we do is those emotions come up and then we project it onto other people. And that's when you stay in the cycles.
Right.
It's like, no,
we stay in it
inside.
Yeah, we stay in it inside too, where we let ourselves suffer. Have you ever had a crying jag that just never ended?
Sometimes.
You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
sit there and you let yourself cry. I'm going to cry until I'm done crying. That's a waste of time, actually.
Yeah.
You only physically need to be triggered for a few seconds before you can take back your life and go do something different. But
Well, see,
we
that's the thing,
love
because
those feelings.
right, because we then create a story around the crying, and that's what makes it go longer.
Yeah.
Because we hook to it going, okay, now I'm going to stay in the suffering pattern.
Yeah. Well, because it feels good for the body too. You know, the body loves to emote and express and do things, and it really doesn't care if it's good or bad. It has no opinion.
Yeah,
And
I tend to shut mine down. That's what I tend to do. I chalk it up and I move on.
a lot of women do. And but then it ends up, of course, in your system.
Well, yeah, you don't want to fester it. So it's about moving it out.
Yeah. And then they take your drop of blood and they look at it and they say, wow, you're pretty messed up. You recognize, you say, okay, I am messed up. I'm going to own that. What do I want to do about it? And then they go to therapy, and not all therapists are very
Well, it
good.
was fascinating. I was with somebody else, and that other person had a harder time actually digesting what was being told to them.
Yep.
From a physiological perspective. And it was funny, like I was in a state of observation, kind of going, so I could take in the information, go, okay, I could be proactive about this, or I could, be, but it's like, no, it's not about the other person. Let the information sink in, because you were just given golden nuggets, and now just make a conscious choice.
Yeah.
But because I've done so much work on regulating my own nervous system, that I didn't necessarily have to trigger. And when somebody was telling me that information, go, okay, well, I get it. Like, I watch this happen over and over again.
Right.
So often it shows up in prostate cancer for men and breast cancer for women, when they're not taking, healing this in the inside for themselves. And I coach on this stuff, and I've watched it happen, going, no, I don't need the disease to develop. No. Like, it's okay.
It's mainly developing as a side effect to your constant emotional reactions to something.
Right.
And so it's really a blessing to choose spiritual and emotional and physical nourishment, because you feel better. You're happier.
Right.
When we choose to not do anything about how we feel,
Right.
and to instead try to control what somebody else is doing, instead of protecting ourselves.
Right.
When we allow ourselves to be addicted to that, you're going to die miserable and alone, unless you hit some bottom where you finally say to yourself,
where there's a crisis point. Yeah.
But it's so much better just to start, walking and sniffing flowers and talking to the squirrels and saying the Lord's Prayer and yelling at somebody so they leave you alone so you can meditate, and locking the door and choosing not to feel guilty. It's so much better to do it now before you end up in a crisis point, because because you think of your crisis points and they have cost you a lot of money, right? And if you had your druthers, you
well over
have avoided that. Yeah.
$700,000 in those crisis points, all because I was triggering and trying to control it and trying to fix it and all of that just was, you know what? I don't necessarily need to do that anymore. Like, it's really fascinating, because it's not that the stuff is not still coming at me. It's still coming at me, but now I'm just kind of like going, yeah, no, I'm not reacting. I'm not responding. Sit in your own stuff.
Right. But if you don't do anything about it, if you don't do anything about it, you would have just kept looking for the person that would teach you how to have boundaries and love and respect yourself, and then relationship after relationship would look the same.
Right. Well, this is why, you see in relationships often, what are the stats? Like, if you get divorced once, you're 50% likely to get divorced twice. And then if you get divorced twice, it's like 95% of the chance you're going to get divorced again. And it's because you marry the same bird with a different name and a different face. And it's all the same behavioral patterns. And you decide, hey, I don't want these behavioral patterns anymore. I'm not doing this anymore. Nope, not going to do it.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to make a distinction between detachment and disassociation.
Do tell.
Because many people think that they're detaching when they're actually disassociating.
And disassociating is a stress response.
Disassociating is a stress response where you pretend like something is not happening, or you're trying to ignore that something's happening, and you're distracting yourself with something else, and you keep telling yourself, well, I just don't care, I'll just
Well,
go.
a lot of women, like many of our moms, those of us who are, in our 40s or 50s, our moms completely disassociated because they were women out in the world that weren't allowed to play sports when they were kids and be participants, and so disassociation was a way that they coped.
Little pink
Right.
pills, remember everybody talking about that? Didn't the Beatles do a song about that? Mom's, little pink pills.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was heavily medicated. No one had, very few people were authentic. And so we learned it, but we're not there anymore.
Right.
Now we have the right to stand up for ourselves. So disassociation is probably what most women learned, which was to, I don't care, I'm going to go do something else. But that makes you sick, or, affects your life in a lot of ways. Detachment is where you acknowledge that you do care,
Right.
and you care a lot, and it's uncomfortable, and you don't like this, and you need to do something about it, because clearly if you're upset, you need to care about that upset.
Right.
You need to respect it and love it, because it's your body talking to you, telling you what it needs. But when we disassociate and pretend like our body isn't freaking out, and we don't have IBS, and we don't have migraine headaches, and we don't have tinnitus, and our backs don't hurt, and we don't have heart problems, if we pretend like that's not happening, well, guess what? You're going to get sick and eventually die, and you're going to take your family through some sort of, cancer or terminal illness sort of thing, and traumatize your kids, and they'll lose you early, and life will suck.
Well, that's the other thing. Years ago, again, this is something I heard Deepak say. He said, why is it that 50, 60 years ago, did people all died in their sleep? And now people like have 10 and 15-year diseases, and then they fall off the planet. And it's like, this is because we're not living. We're in these suffering patterns.
It's
And
a cycle. Yeah, it's
right,
a suffering cycle.
right. Oh, it's fascinating to me.
I know.
And
I
it's
know.
all about self-loving yourself, being in the state of the observer. And a lot of people, it's funny, I just had this conversation with my kids last night, and I'm like going, that's not selfish, that's self-care. Because one of my children is very clear of what she wants, how she wants, and everybody else is offended by it. And I'm
Oh,
like,
sure. Yeah, and probably put her down, and they're like, well, why didn't you just get along with everybody? Why don't you just do what everybody else wants?
exactly. And my
Back to trouble in the first
communication
place.
to her is, don't don't fold, don't, like, you be you, because it's other people's stuff that they are lashing out at you. You are the pillar who is, because huge heart and still takes care of other people, but she makes sure that she's taking care of herself. And I'm like, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
Well,
because
that's like a model.
imagine, let's say somebody it has closer to autism, maybe Aspergery sorts of things. They're actually highly sensitive to their environment, to noise, to the energy around them, to colors. Highly sensitive, and
Mhm.
everything's really just a spectrum.
Right.
So we all have a little bit of everything. But let's say your nervous system is dialed up a little bit more, and everybody keeps telling you that you just need to ignore it.
Yep.
You just need to ignore the fact that your stomach's all knotted up, and your heart's beating too fast, and your head's pounding, and your face is red. You just need to ignore that. There's something wrong with you.
Right.
It's recognizing, oh, look, I have a sensitive nervous system. I need to treat it differently. And other people won't understand that because they don't know what it's like to be me. And so I have to educate them, even if I have to educate them in ways that mean I have to be a little tougher than I want to be.
Yeah. And you know what? It's okay to be you. That's the other piece in the communication that I continue to reinforce, that we all have gifts, and don't negotiate those away, because I just know that, I mean, it was even interesting, like, even though I had plenty of opportunity compared to my mom in sports and activities and all that stuff, it still came with the fact that, the girls didn't have as good of gym times as the boys had the gym time. and, you know, and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, look at women's sports now. The women's soccer, you know,
Right.
they've been up in arms. Women's softball,
Right.
women's basketball, and we've been brainwashed and trained to think that that's the best we're going to get. And in reality, women have so much power, but they've been manipulated over and over and over. That's why marketers scare me more than anybody, I think, because they understand people's deeper human triggers.
Oh, huge.
And
Right.
narcissists are the same way. The narcissists study people and they understand the deep human triggers. They just, you know, manipulate it for their own gain.
Right.
You know, and marketers do the same thing. Empaths, on the other hand, we understand, but we're also sensitive to what's going on, so that we treat it with respect. We're like, yes, I could tear you apart, but I'm choosing not to right now. I
Right.
could manipulate you, but I'm choosing not to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's owning that power is what will get women out of our hole.
Well, and we have to realize that we choose to be manipulated.
Yes.
Like, that's the piece that, you know, because you had said earlier, you said, you know, we are manipulated. And yeah, but we have to realize that is our choice because we choose to step out of our power. So our power is held in our solar plexus, right? So it's just above our belly buttons. And my physical body will actually literally puff out above my belly button when I am not in my power. And I'm like going, oop, I stepped out of my power. Oops, like, how do I do that? I can now, I've become so sensitive to it, I can physiologically notice the difference.
Right. And then when you notice it, that gives you the cue, your intuitive cue, and you say, what do I want to do about this? But
Well, right. So going, and some of it, sometimes it's just me exiting from the situation completely and just being like, whoop. But we have not even given ourselves a chance to realize we're not in our power because we've become just so used to that. That's the way I've operated in the world.
yeah.
Right.
We're used to being in contraction. When you're triggered physically right around your solar plexus, you end up contracting. And so we're always doing this. And if we're constantly under stress, then we're constantly contracted, hence why your solar plexus puffs out.
Yep.
You know, and we have to tell our body, no, it's okay. You don't need to be contracted. You can relax. What do we need to do to help you relax? What do we need to do to help you feel comfortable? And that has to be the first thing in your head is, oh, I'm clearly uncomfortable. My body's not happy with this. What do I need to do?
Right.
But you have to acknowledge it's happening. You have to notice it's happening, acknowledge it's happening, acknowledge you've got choice to do something about it, even if it's not the choices that you'd like.
Right.
You know, but you still have choices where you can work towards it and then do something about it.
It's absolutely beautiful.
Right.
And this is where this is, again, goes back to, this is how you find that inner completeness, that inner wholeness. And it's all of these little things that, you know, staying in an empowered state, not giving your power away, choosing to not be manipulated, choosing. And I'll tell you, like, when you are used to operating in the world in a certain way, it's not easy to make that shift. Like, you'll get it a little bit, then you'll get it a little bit more, and then you'll get a little bit more because you'll fall off the horse. You absolutely will. And when you do, you kind of go, oops, that sucked. Okay, next.
Right.
As opposed to beating yourself up for falling off the horse. Like, I'm kind of going, you know, I can recall, like, when there were times when, you know, I thought when divorce was over, oh man, great. Shoot, that's just when it started. Like, that is just when it started. And I have seen so many of my clients deal with this exact same scenario that you think, okay, you made the decision to make the divorce and then you do it. And then you're like, I'm free. And then you're like, yeah, not really, because I had kids with this bird and that still attaches me somehow. So you still have to build the muscle to do it differently in the world.
Right. And it's still planted in your head. You know,
right.
Because if we go back to the beginning of our conversation, we're attracted to people who have something that we want to learn about, that we want to learn from.
That's huge.
You don't learn it, you're going to get out of the relationship and then find a pet rock, and that's going to become the new narcissist.
But I remember you telling me, Rita, you were very clear to me going, Nope, you're showing up different in the world now, so it's going to show up different in the world now. And if those of you are trying to build the muscle and you're not there yet, hire Rita as your coach. I am telling you, because I was very conscious, very aware that there's no way in hell I'm repeating these patterns. And so literally I would have a coaching call with her going, okay, so this scenario came up. I know that this is how I did it in the past and I don't want to do it again. So help me out. And she's like, because my fear is that I was repeating the pattern. She's like, of course you're not, because you're responding differently. You're showing up differently. And so it is important that if you are not in a place where you fully built that muscle to get to the other side, bring in Rita's support. I am telling you, it has made my process way faster than I could have done on my own.
Yeah, well, thank you. And Julie absolutely is, because my weakness was receiving. I would give and give and give it as an empath, and I wouldn't receive. And so I'd be in business. I've been in business for a long time, and I'm so focused on giving and so not focused on receiving, that I'm like, I've got a money issue I have to sort out now. I've got 14 years of debt because I've been giving and giving and just waiting for things to change. It's just going to change, when that's not it. And like Julie's client said, she's a money therapist. She teaches you how to receive.
Well, and it's this one of the biggest things that I always have people do if you have a challenge with receiving, because usually you'll receive it and then you'll let it go right back out the window. And so I'll literally have people take $100 bill and put it in their wallet and don't spend it under any circumstances. Why? Because then you're learning to actually hold it in abundance. You don't know how to hold money in abundance. And I'm telling you, when you first do this, Benjamin Franklin on that $100 bill will be talking to you, saying, spend me. You'll get all this dialogue in your head and they'll be like, what? And I'm telling you, it's funny. Like, so receiving and holding, like, it was really interesting. We went out to dinner last night for my oldest. He turned 12 years old. And we were sitting there at the table. It's me, the boyfriend, and our 6 kids combined. And we had multiple people come up to our table and say, you guys have an amazing family. And like, it was so sweet. And then at the end of the evening, this guy came up. He was an older African-American male. And it was funny. I noticed during the dinner, he kept like looking at over a table. And part of me was kind of like, why does he keep looking at us? Like, that's a little weird. And he walked up with the waiter, and the waiter said, do you mind this gentleman talk to you guys? And we're like, sure, no problem. And the gentleman looked at my son who turned 12 and he said, I had people look out for me and I can see who you are and I want to support who you are. He goes, happy birthday, young man, and handed him some money. And what was fascinating for me was my son was like he melted. It was beautiful. Like that somebody cared enough, like this complete stranger that we've never met before just walked up to him. So it was interesting to watch my son receive that and then hold it. And I go, what do you feel? And he started tearing up as the guy started walking away. I go, well, go tell him and give him a hug and say thank you. And so my son like literally ran across the restaurant to go meet this man to just thank him for acknowledging and recognizing him. And it was interesting to watch my son then hold that receiving. And it was like these little miracles and these little nuggets in life, right, are here to teach us. And I guarantee my son will remember that man the rest of his life.
Right. Because when we talk about the universe supporting us, that's what we mean. Totally. That's what we mean. We're not talking about lightning coming from the sky and planting $1 million on our doorstep. We're talking about that there are people out there who are good people, kind people, and we all have this within us.
Right.
And you can pull it out of people. Even the nastiest narcissist, you can usually pull out goodness every so often, you know. And so you try to pull out goodness from people, and that's what gives you safety and security. because
Yep.
then you're in the flow with the universe. The universe is
Right.
you, the universe is me, the universe is this conversation we're having and the information we're putting out into the field.
Beautiful.
It
Mhm.
supports us, but we
Yep.
can't see it and we can't
Right.
feel it when we're like this, because we're literally disconnecting ourselves from source. When I was a kid, I was in high school and I didn't have many friends growing up because I had all these traumas when I was a kid. So I was a little freaky, but successful.
Right.
So I was making my way through life. And I was trying to get more friends because I'd never had friends. And because I was too weird. And I said to myself, I didn't have any friends. I said to myself, if you're lonely, it's because you have disconnected from people. If you want to not be
Right.
lonely,
That's your choice.
you have to make the choice to connect with people. And even if they say, no, I'm not interested, it's the act of reaching
Right.
out. It's going from this to this and feeling safe enough to do it, because you know if somebody comes at you and they're going to hurt you, you're going to punch them in the face. You know, you don't have to leave yourself vulnerable to be victimized. You can actually do something about it and they'll survive.
They do. They do. This has been amazing. I cannot believe an hour went by that fast.
I know. It was dense. This was a dense.
So Rita, how do people get a hold of you? Because I think you're that important.
Oh, thank you. coaching.com, and I work with all sorts of things. Anything relationship related, I'll help people through if they feel stuck.
Yep.
And I also help after that, because after the healing, you use the same tools to become like a genius, to become
That's
super
true.
successful.
Right.
So it doesn't just stop with, oh, thank God I survived this terrible marriage and now I'm out of it. Now you're able to say, do I want to be a gymnast? Do I want to be the president of the United States? Do I want to go to Rome? What do I want to do? And you actually now have the fuel and the resources and the insight and the understanding to
Right.
make those dreams that you had as a kid come true in some way.
Yep. I love it. I love it. And by all means, I continue to give my book away for free because I really want to financially heal the world here because we need it. So go to my website, juliemurphy.com. Just click, give us your email address. We're giving away the book for free. And I'll also make sure that I put the link below. And
if and if people follow what you've put out, which to many people will seem counterintuitive,
yep.
Yep. They'll think, oh, well, this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to manipulate people, or you're supposed to sacrifice. No, that's in your suffering cycle. You actually need to realize that you have to put yourself into a good place. And that's what you help people do, is change how they think about where their problems are coming from. And actually do the things that get them out of the problem, not just give them. I remember I was talking to a 16-year-old kid who's trying to figure out what he wants to do with his life. And he says, well, of course, I'll probably sit down and make a list of pros and cons. And he says, well, I probably won't, but I should. And I said, no, I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to go into your head and make a list of pros and cons. I want you to be curious, and I want you to go down the rabbit hole and go on YouTube and study these things and follow, oh, this is an interesting person, or that's something that's curious. Oh, look, there's a school like that. And then I want you to intuitively decide what you want to do. Maybe list down 10 or 20 things that seem interesting to you, and then feel your way through it. Yep. Don't do pros and cons. That takes you to your intuition.
Exactly.
You want to get into
just
your
focus on what you want to create
than your brain. Yes, exactly. And then you start creating it, but you have to get out of the suffering cycle first. And you have to have the resources. You have to know how to get out of it. And that's where I come in. I teach people how to get out of it. And then you teach them how to apply it in regards to their finances and fix their finances.
Yep, because you can create everything and anything you want in your life. You just have to decide you want it.
Absolutely. Well, this is cool. Thanks.
Thanks, Rita. Love you. And I am super grateful. And everybody, if you have any questions or if you want to come live with us and we help you work through some stuff, we know that if you are willing and have the courage to come on with us, we will actually help many thousands of other people, because that's how it works.
Oh, yeah. And our coaching, goes for several $100s for an hour. Yep. So, and between the two of us, we're very expensive people. So to get to come on a call and get coaching from us is highly valuable.
Yep.
Highly valuable. You're not going to get this anywhere else because nobody's talking about this stuff in this way.
Which is fascinating to me, which is why we have the gift to give. So why not? We're going to use it and we're going to help you get to that next place.
Absolutely. That's what we're here for. Cool.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye.